Once hailed as Hollywood's royal disruptor, Meghan Markle is now facing a crisis she never saw coming. Her latest Netflix project, once poised to redefine her post-royal image, has instead sparked headlines for all the wrong reasons. With dismal ratings, viewer backlash, and whispers of internal chaos, the fallout is impossible to ignore. Could this be the moment Meghan's media empire begins to crumble? Let's unravel exactly what went wrong and why it's sending shockwaves through her brand. Meghan's big Netflix gamble turns into a nightmare. When Meghan Markle signed her multi-million-dollar Netflix deal back in the year 2020, many believed it would mark the beginning of a powerful new chapter. No longer bound by palace protocols, she finally had creative freedom and a massive global platform to tell stories on her own terms. The hype surrounding her debut project was enormous. Tabloids speculated, fans debated, and streaming insiders watched closely. Would this be the moment Meghan proved the doubters wrong? For a while, it certainly seemed so. Her name trended online for weeks before the release, and early trailers hinted at a deeply personal, emotionally resonant narrative that could reshape how the public viewed her. But when the project finally dropped, the buzz evaporated almost instantly. Ratings trickled in, and they were abysmal. Viewers dropped off within the first 15 minutes. Critics panned the show for lacking depth and authenticity. This wasn't the groundbreaking content people were promised. It felt disconnected, overly polished, and for many, simply boring. What was intended to be a triumphant creative debut ended up being labeled a tone-deaf disaster. Instead of generating admiration, it sparked confusion and criticism. Many asked, how could someone so media-savvy miss the mark so badly? It wasn't just a matter of low viewership. It was the sense that Meghan had lost her grip on what audiences actually wanted. And for a figure so deeply tied to public perception, that kind of misstep is far more than a minor embarrassment. It's a full-blown image crisis. But as we'll see next, the worst part wasn't the project itself, it was how the world reacted once the numbers came in. Because what followed wasn't just disappointment, it was humiliation on a global scale. The harsh reality behind the show's ratings disaster, the numbers weren't just low, they were historically disastrous. Within the first 48 hours of release, Meghan's Netflix show had plummeted to the bottom tier of the platform's engagement rankings. In an age where even average content can go viral with the right social push, this kind of failure stood out like a sore thumb. Industry analysts quickly took notice. Reports circulated that the show had failed to crack the top 10 in major markets, including the United States, the United Kingdom, Canada, and Australia, regions where Meghan had once enjoyed significant support. For a project backed by one of the most recognizable names in modern media, this was not just unexpected, it was humiliating. By the third day, insiders began leaking internal metrics. Viewer retention was alarmingly low. Many viewers abandoned the show before reaching the halfway point of the first episode, and binge completion rates were almost non-existent. Critics weren't any kinder. Major outlets used phrases like directionless, overproduced, and emotionally vacant in their reviews. Even those who had previously supported Meghan's foray into content creation admitted that this debut felt more like a misfire than a meaningful statement. According to data specialists familiar with Netflix trends, the show's trajectory mirrored that of a forgettable filler release, not a tentpole project led by a global figure. Netflix, a company known for championing bold narratives and fresh voices, had quietly expected Meghan's show to perform on par with other celebrity-backed productions. Yet behind closed doors, executives were reportedly blindsided by how poorly the project was received. There were even whispers that the streaming giant might reconsider the long-term viability of its partnership with the Sussexes. For Meghan, who had invested so much of her post-royal identity into this deal, the implications were chilling. And just when things seemed like they couldn't get worse, the public reaction hit like a tidal wave. Viewer reactions were brutal and unforgiving. While critics can often be harsh, It was the reaction from everyday viewers that truly underscored the depth of the failure. Social media platforms lit up with commentary, and very little of it was kind. Across Twitter, Reddit, and YouTube, audiences vented their disappointment. The tone wasn't just critical, it was deeply unforgiving. Many accused the show of being self-indulgent, lacking any genuine connection to real-world struggles. Some called it an echo chamber of privilege, while others questioned whether Meghan had lost touch with the very public she once claimed to represent. On YouTube, popular reaction channels posted scathing reviews, many garnering hundreds of thousands of views within days. Titles like "Meghan's Netflix Disaster Explained" and "This is just embarrassing." Trending pages, viewers cited slow pacing, overuse of dramatic monologues, and a lack of any real narrative tension. Perhaps most damaging was the widespread sentiment that the project felt inauthentic. A word that cuts deep for someone whose entire brand has hinged on truth-telling and emotional honesty. Comment sections were flooded, with viewers expressing not only disappointment but also a growing sense of fatigue with Meghan's media presence. Even fan forums that once defended her began to splinter. Supporters admitted the show was hard to watch and lacked the relatability that had initially drawn them to her journey. Instead of seeing a vulnerable woman reclaiming her voice, they saw a heavily scripted version of a life many no longer found compelling. The criticism wasn't just about bad storytelling, it was about a disconnect between the image Meghan wanted to project and the audience's evolving expectations. As the negative buzz grew, the mood shifted from passive disinterest to open mockery, and what began as a creative stumble quickly evolved into a public spectacle. But, as we'll see next, the fallout wasn't just digital noise. It triggered real consequences behind the scenes. Netflix execs begin quiet damage control. Inside Netflix headquarters, the mood reportedly turned from excitement to damage control in a matter of days. According to insider leaks from mid-level staff, top executives were stunned by the rapid collapse of Meghan's project. What was supposed to be a cornerstone of their celebrity partnership strategy had now become a liability. The show, once touted as a prestige release, was quietly pulled from promotional slots on the platform's homepage in key regions. Mentions of the project on Netflix's official social channels dried up overnight. It was as if the streaming giant wanted to distance itself from the entire ordeal without sparking a new PR storm. Behind closed doors, meetings were said to be tense. Executives who had championed the deal with Meghan and Harry back in the year 2020 reportedly faced internal scrutiny. Budgets were reviewed, marketing teams were questioned, and there was growing concern that the couple, once seen as a unique content powerhouse, might not have the staying power needed for long-term partnerships. The situation became even more uncomfortable when media outlets began reporting on Netflix's internal disappointment. Although no official statement was issued, anonymous sources hinted at a strategic reassessment of future projects involving the Sussexes. Even more telling was the silence from Netflix's normally vocal publicity arm. When successful celebrity-backed shows premiere, the company typically celebrates across platforms, posting behind-the-scenes features, cast interviews, and social media teasers. But for Meghan's show, none of that happened after release week. The show had become the elephant in the room. Too big to ignore, too painful to spotlight. This sudden cold shoulder didn't go unnoticed by the public. Industry blogs and entertainment watchdogs began piecing together the puzzle. Netflix had bet big on Meghan, and now they were quietly retreating. But if executives thought that staying quiet would contain the fallout, they underestimated one thing: Meghan's personal reaction. And according to reports, what happened next behind the scenes left her entire team scrambling. Meghan's reaction: full-blown meltdown reported by insiders. Behind the cameras and away from the streaming metrics, Meghan Markle was reportedly in emotional freefall. According to multiple insider reports, her response to the show's failure was nothing short of a full-blown meltdown. While her public image has always been tightly controlled, graceful, articulate, and composed, what unfolded privately was far more raw and intense. Sources close to the production claimed that Meghan felt blindsided by the poor reception and betrayed by Netflix for their lack of post-release support. She allegedly lashed out at both internal staff and outside consultants, questioning how the rollout had gone so wrong when so much effort had been poured into the project. One insider described the mood as chaotic, saying that Meghan had expected this project to be the moment she redefined her public legacy. Instead, she found herself reading headlines that called the show unwatchable and irrelevant. The emotional weight of that reversal reportedly left her distraught and, at times, inconsolable. There were also rumors of a tense confrontation between Meghan and one of the show's executive producers, in which she accused the team of failing to protect her image. Whether or not that confrontation actually happened, the whispers alone were enough to make waves in Hollywood. Compounding the emotional spiral was the eerie silence from Prince Harry. While he had always been publicly supportive of Meghan's endeavors, insiders say he remained unusually quiet during the fallout. Some speculated that he too had doubts about the direction the show had taken, but chose to stay out of the spotlight to avoid adding fuel to the fire. Others believed he was simply trying to shield his wife from further stress. Either way, Meghan's growing frustration became the dominant narrative. As her team scrambled to reframe the story, Meghan's vulnerability became a talking point among media circles. But if they thought a carefully worded press release could change the tide, they were about to face a much harsher reality, because the press wasn't backing down and the palace was watching. The palace reacts, silence with a hint of satisfaction. As Meghan's Netflix debacle made international headlines, the British royal family remained characteristically silent. There were no public statements, no subtle digs, no official commentary of any kind, and yet the silence itself spoke volumes. According to royal insiders quoted in several British tabloids, there was a sense of quiet satisfaction rippling through palace corridors, not necessarily out of cruelty, but out of vindication. For years, Meghan and Harry had criticized the institution for stifling their voices and mishandling their media narratives. Now, stripped of the palace's machinery and protected legacy, Meghan's media experiment had stumbled badly, and many within the monarchy viewed that outcome as a form of poetic justice. Privately, some palace staff reportedly described the Netflix failure as inevitable. Without the constraints and structure of royal protocol, they believed Meghan's storytelling would lose its focus. And to many inside the firm, that's exactly what happened. The show's tone-deaf execution, its lack of broad emotional appeal, and the overwhelming backlash were viewed as confirmation that stepping away from the crown wasn't as easy or empowering as the Sussexes had hoped. Even senior members of the family, though careful not to make any direct comments, were rumored to have taken a certain amount of personal relief in the public's harsh reception. But not everyone at the palace saw it as a win. A few royal commentators suggested that Meghan's failure reflected a larger problem for the monarchy, that the public's appetite for royal media might be declining altogether. Others warned that gloating, even privately, would only serve to widen the rift between the Sussexes and the rest of the family. Still, the dominant mood within royal circles remained clear. There would be no sympathy extended, no helping hand offered, and certainly no statements of support. As Meghan and her team battled the media narrative on their own, the absence of royal engagement underscored just how far she had drifted from the institution that once defined her global image. But her challenges weren't just reputational. They were about to become very financial. PR teams go into overdrive, but it's too late. As headlines turned increasingly vicious and public opinion soured, Meghan's public relations team launched into full crisis mode. The strategy was immediate: change the conversation, drown out the criticism, and pivot toward a more sympathetic narrative. Carefully crafted press statements were drafted, emphasizing Meghan's dedication to storytelling, the noble themes behind the project, and her continued commitment to producing meaningful content. Talking points were quietly distributed to friendly media outlets. Influencers with ties to the Sussex camp posted vague but supportive messages online, encouraging empathy and resilience. It was the kind of behind-the-scenes media manipulation Meghan's team had once been praised for. But this time, the magic was gone. The public wasn't buying it. Every article that tried to reframe the Netflix show as misunderstood or ahead of its time was met with biting comments and eye-roll emojis. YouTube videos debunked the spin in real time, while media watchdogs dissected every PR attempt like hawks circling a wounded animal. The harder the team pushed, the more transparent the damage control appeared. And perhaps most damning of all, Netflix itself remained completely silent. Unlike previous partnerships where streaming giants rallied behind their embattled stars, Netflix made no attempt to defend Meghan. There were no social media endorsements, no second chances hinted at, no calls for critics to reassess. It was a deafening absence. Insiders speculated that the company had already written off the project internally and was simply waiting for the noise to die down. In PR circles, this is called a soft exit, where a company lets a controversial figure fade without confrontation, hoping the story will be buried by the next trending headline. But this story refused to die. As media coverage intensified and speculation about contract renegotiations spread, Meghan's team found themselves losing control. What was meant to be a temporary stumble had escalated into a branding catastrophe. And with deals hanging in the balance, Meghan's reputation wasn't the only thing at risk. Her financial future was suddenly in question. Meghan's brand deals now in jeopardy. In the months leading up to her Netflix release, Meghan Markle had cultivated an image as a multifaceted media mogul, someone who could juggle royal legacy with modern influence. Her name was attached to wellness brands, fashion collaborations, podcast ventures, and philanthropic campaigns. But after the failure of her highly publicized Netflix project, that once flawless image began to crack. Behind the scenes, brand partners reportedly grew nervous. Executives in boardrooms quietly began to reassess their associations, asking difficult questions. If Meghan couldn't draw an audience with a global platform like Netflix, could she really deliver value elsewhere? According to marketing insiders, several brand deals that had been in late-stage discussions were abruptly paused. A well-known skincare company was said to have delayed its planned ambassador rollout featuring Meghan. A fashion capsule collection once set to launch with considerable fanfare suddenly vanished from the development calendar. Even streaming platforms reportedly began distancing themselves from her and Harry's production company, Archwell Productions, unsure whether future content would be commercially viable. The fallout wasn't just about one failed show. It was about a larger trust that had been broken between Meghan and the industry. Meghan's personal brand had always been built around empowerment, elegance, and authenticity. But after the Netflix fiasco, the narrative had shifted. Now, critics painted her as out of touch, overly curated, and increasingly irrelevant. That kind of reputational damage doesn't just hurt feelings, it threatens income streams. As sponsorships wavered and new opportunities dried up, the financial implications became more real. The Sussexes, who once signed multi-million-dollar deals with ease, now faced the daunting prospect of starting from scratch in an industry that has a short memory and even shorter patience. What makes this even more striking is how quickly the tide turned. In the span of just a few weeks, Meghan's media empire, one that had been carefully assembled since leaving the royal family in the year 2020, was suddenly on life support. But beyond the headlines and the contracts, there was an even more pressing question. What comes next for a public figure when both the palace and the public turn their back? What this means for the Sussexes' future media plans? When Meghan and Harry stepped back from royal duties in the early months of the year 2020, they envisioned a future filled with creative independence and global influence. Their media plans weren't just about telling stories, they were about building an empire. With production deals signed across top-tier platforms and their Archwell brand gaining attention, the couple seemed to be on a clear trajectory to become Hollywood power players. But now, with Meghan's Netflix show collapsing under its own weight, the entire roadmap is being questioned. The failure has triggered more than just PR headaches, it has exposed serious cracks in their media strategy. Internally, Archwell Productions is said to be facing pressure. Projects that were once considered greenlit are now under review. There's a renewed focus on deliverables, audience testing, and clearer proof of market demand. In short, the cushion of celebrity has thinned. No longer can the Sussexes rely solely on their names to secure attention or investment. The industry is asking for results, and fast. Harry's own media endeavors, which were supposed to run parallel to Meghan's, may also be affected. While his documentary on military veterans received some praise, the couple's brand has become so intertwined that one failure casts shadows over the other. Furthermore, there's speculation that Netflix may be rethinking the broader relationship altogether. While official contracts remain confidential, Hollywood insiders suggest that performance clauses are being closely examined. If Meghan's project failed to meet viewership benchmarks, it could limit the budget or scope of future releases or cancel them entirely. That would leave the Sussexes in a precarious position, without the palace's support and potentially without the backing of the very industry they turn to for reinvention. What makes the situation particularly complex is timing. As public interest wanes and rival creators continue to rise, the couple may find it increasingly difficult to reclaim relevance. For Meghan and Harry, the dream of controlling their narrative now faces its most difficult test. But before any comeback can begin, they'll have to reckon with what many see as the core of the problem: overexposure and ambition that may have outpaced reality. From royalty to reality, the price of overexposure. In the beginning, Meghan Markle's story was one of modern fairy tale proportions. A biracial American actress who captured a prince's heart and brought a breath of fresh air into one of the world's oldest monarchies. But that charm, that novelty, has since evolved into something far more complicated. Over the past 5 years, from the couple's departure from the royal family in the year 2020 to their ambitious deals with streaming giants, Meghan's visibility has been relentless. Every move, every statement, every project was amplified to global proportions. And now, in the wake of her Netflix show's collapse, the consequences of that constant spotlight have come crashing down. Public fatigue, once a subtle undercurrent, has now surged to the surface. Audiences no longer view Meghan as an outsider fighting for her voice. They see a celebrity who's become indistinguishable from the polished, calculated image she once criticized. That overexposure has dulled the public's empathy and sharpened their scrutiny. Each failed project, each PR spin, only deepens the perception that the authenticity Meghan built her brand on was, perhaps, just another performance. The tragedy isn't just in the bad reviews or the lost deals, it's in the broader narrative shift, from inspirational figure to cautionary tale. Meghan's attempt to control her story through Hollywood may have given her more creative freedom, but it also removed the institutional shield the palace once provided. In the raw arena of media and entertainment, where criticism is instant and brutal, even the most carefully managed image can unravel in real time. Yet, it's not all over. Public figures have come back from worse, but the road ahead will demand more than another documentary or rebrand. It will require humility, reinvention, and perhaps for the first time in years, silence. Because sometimes the most powerful message isn't in another episode, it's in knowing when to step out of the frame. And if Meghan Markle hopes to rebuild what was lost, she may need to rewrite her story from the ground up.